This is such a good viewer comment that I wanted to make a few comments on it myself. This is from a video I did called non-duality, practicing non-duality while taking a walk in 5 steps. But there are a lot of good questions in here that I wanted to answer in regards to that video or just non-duality contemplations in general. So the question is, how is merging with everything different than natural meditation? So very important, meditation styles or techniques, natural meditation, shikantaza. These are all practices, essentially. Now, we could talk about the fact that shikantaza, natural meditation, is actually accessing the natural meditative state, let's say, although it's often interpreted as a practice in that it's intermittent. You sit down and do that type of practice, or you sit down and not do that type of practice. But it's something that is, at least in the context of practice, right? Now, how is that different than merging with everything? Well, merging with everything isn't actually something that happens, but the words are tricky when we talk about non-duality. I might actually say, how is that different, natural meditation, than the realization that there is not two, right? That there's no two things to merge. And to have that direct experience, that direct insight, that direct realization of not two, of non-duality, of no subject-object, of boundlessness, and ultimately of formlessness. They're very different in that one of them is an insight, right? Non-duality is an insight, and the other is essentially a practice. It doesn't negate the practice. It doesn't negate shikantaza or natural meditation, but that's referencing a contextual approach to, let's say, mindfulness. It's a practice approach. Whereas when I talk about non-duality, the realization that there is nothing to merge, the clear and obvious realization of formlessness, which comes in deeper stage realization. It's not something that typically happens early. Although you may have glimpses of it, it will not stabilize early. It is essentially irreversible. It's an insight that is clear, more clear than anything the mind will make up about the way reality looks, as far as being relegated to a subject-object experience, having a center that is you, having a world of separate objects that feel distinct from one another and appear distinct from one another. That's far less real than the realization itself. The realization is something that is such a gut level instinctual shift that it's clear that this is how it is, so to speak. Now, I don't want to say it is this way or that way, because that can get slippery as well. And there's even a deeper insight about that. But specific to the non-dual insight, it's a clear and essentially irreversible realization about the formless nature of reality or of appearance. Okay, so that's the first part of the question, and then it says, I hear people talking about merging with everything instead of being aware of awareness, for example. It's very interesting that you asked the question this way. I don't know this person, and I'm not picking on them at all, but these phrases like aware of awareness or awareness standing on its own, these do get picked up. Like, I don't know, like you have static electricity, right? And you watch enough non-duality videos and you pick it up like lint, right? That sounds bad, but we tend to pick up these concepts, but not necessarily investigate whether we have direct experience of that. Do you have direct experience of being aware of awareness? What is that like? If there's being aware of awareness, is there even something called awareness anymore? What does that mean? Does it mean being purely conscious? Does it mean mere being? Does it mean mere knowingness? What are you referring to there? Because all of those could be described as insights, but those are earlier insights than non-duality. The non-dual insight is very obviously not awareness standing on its own. So this idea of being aware of awareness as a practice is fine. I don't necessarily talk about it that way, but it's fine. But just understand, if you suddenly have some shift where it's like, oh, I am pure awareness. I am aware of pure awareness, and that's all there is pure awareness. That's fine as an insight. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's an earlier stage of realization, then true non-dual realization actually collapses that. It collapses the experience of awareness on its own, apart from anything. Very, very clearly, very obviously, as I said in the first part. So, good question. Then the next question says, then I hear of natural meditation as letting all things come and go. Well, maybe. I wouldn't define natural meditation that way. The way I defined it in the book is that it's essentially an undirected experience. You're not letting anything happen. You're not trying to make things happen. You're not trying to realize any idealized state. You're not trying to experience any idealized state. So to say, you're just sort of letting things come and go, that's kind of your idealized state, right? If you're thinking in those terms, you're not doing anything like that. There's no practice. There's no practitioner, no practice. There's only what is appearing. That's it. And it's not idealized. There's no right or wrong way of experiencing. There's no drive to achieve a certain meditative state or a certain experience. There's no predisposed idea about thoughts being worse than, say, sounds or sensations or consciousness. It's just totally free, right? It's free of any agendas. That's natural meditation. The Zen term would be shikantaza. So just to be clear on that. And then the next part says, and I'm also told that natural meditation will not lead to permanent enlightenment, but only that it will help along the way. So again, like this is what happens. Like we pick up lint in a way, like we hear all these little things and then the mind tries to put them all together in some way to make it make sense, right? Like some puzzle with all these little pieces. But I just want to address each one of these pieces because each of them sort of demonstrate a certain view that can be confusing, right? And especially try to put all these views together, it gets very confusing. So I just wanted to address each one. I'm not making fun of the questions. I'm saying they're good questions, but I'm just making that comment on how this stuff sometimes accumulates in our mind, right? So natural meditation will not lead to permanent enlightenment, only that it will help along the way. I can't say that, and I don't think you can. I don't think anyone can say that this or this or this will always lead to enlightenment, or this or this or this will never lead to enlightenment. Can't say that. Natural meditation ultimately is enlightenment, right? Dogen had this beautiful phrase he would use, practice enlightenment. They're one thing. Practice and enlightenment are not two. And at a deeper insight, a deeper stage of insight, that becomes really clear what that means. So from that standpoint, I can't say that natural meditation can't lead to enlightenment. Natural meditation is enlightenment, right? In fact, for many people, myself included, it wasn't until a sort of deeper insight occurred that natural meditation became obvious, like what it even is. Because before that, again, it was interpreted by my mind as a practice, as something I was doing, that there's a right and wrong way to do it, which is hilarious. That's exactly not what it is. But it didn't click for me instinctually until it just happened one day, and then it was obvious. It never was not obvious after that. The analogy for that is something like chocolate. You've heard the analogy, you can have all kinds of people describe the flavor of chocolate and so forth, but until you taste it, you don't know what it tastes like. You just don't know what it tastes like. The second you taste it, you always know what it tastes like. It's that kind of a thing, right? So, yeah. And then there's another question here. Do we not need to have a recognition of awareness itself? You don't need to worry about awareness itself. I don't teach that way. I don't talk that way. I don't think it's wrong. Some people do, but you don't need to have any idea of awareness. You don't need to reify awareness. You just don't need that. If you're curious about awareness, investigate its nature for sure. Yeah? Right? Yeah. But you don't need to have any recognition of anything specific, especially a sort of recognition of awareness as some background or substratum of experience. It'll probably happen to some degree, and you may or may not even call it awareness. That's again, you're predisposed based on what you've heard. That's just how this goes. People who wake up after having watched a certain teacher will speak like that teacher for a while until they kind of come into their own. I've just seen this happen. So, it's part of the deal. And that's not wrong. It's just because when you wake up, what you wake up to is truly ineffable. What you wake up to is indescribable. Truly. It's literally indescribable. Not just figuratively, right? So does it mean that people can't point? It doesn't mean that people can't use the arrow of language, right? The finger pointing to the moon and all that. Yeah, that can happen. But it's impossible to say exactly what it is, right? Of course, because it's purely experiential. So it's not wrong to use the words that you may have heard a certain teacher use, or your teacher, teaching styles and so forth. It's not wrong, but it does show you something that, oh, well, if that person wakes up listening to Tony Parsons, they may talk like Tony Parsons. If that person wakes up in a Zen setting, they may speak like Zen. So does that mean there's two different kinds of awakening? No, of course not. It just means that when you confront the ineffable and then try to talk about it, which is a whole other thing, whether you should even do that, most times not, then what would you have to use? Well, you use the words you've heard. Now, as the insight gets deeper and deeper, you start to really trust this kind of natural expression that comes out of absolute oblivion, and that can come forth with all kinds of different words. And so the flavor does change. It becomes more original, more creative, more spontaneous and impromptu, I would say. It also matures. But you'll notice that people use a certain teaching style just because that's what they heard before they woke up. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last sentence says, I know I'm in my head about this. Oh, are you in your head? Is there a you in there? These sound like honest questions, and they're good questions, actually. A lot of people probably wonder these things. And again, a lot of it comes from just being exposed to different teaching styles and being like, oh, that person really, really talks about awareness a lot. Maybe that's really, really important. Maybe it is for that teaching style. I don't know. So, yeah. Thank you for your questions, by the way. I'll give you a heart. And I do answer people's questions on these videos periodically. I can't guarantee it, but I do what I can. If you want to watch me answer questions live, or you want to ask me questions live, sustaining members on my channel, you click the join button. I do answer sustaining member questions live once a month, and I do a double barrel non-duality on Zoom once a month for the same level with a second person where we tag team your questions. So, yeah, thank you.